What is up? Welcome back to Talks with Tat. I got my bud. This is Bubba. He's going to be hanging out with me during our episode 4 on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So welcome back. I took a week off. I know some of you guys missed me. I apologize, but I'm back and I'm here to talk to you guys about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu about 4 years ago. Kind of a long roundabout way of getting into it, but I think episode 3, some of you guys watched, I do law enforcement part-time. I'm a reserve deputy sheriff, and just thought it was good to get some hands-on experience on the regular so that it's not quite so awkward when you're out dealing with someone and you got to put hands on. I usually train a couple of nights a week, probably 2 to 3, and get a lot of good experience in there. My little friend's moving around. So yeah, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, let's talk about some of the things like what do you wear? If you guys are familiar with karate, right? Karate has a gi, which is a traditional like kimono where you have the jacket and the pants. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is the same. And underneath your gi jacket and your gi pants, you'll wear traditionally what's called spats, which to you and me is like yoga pants. And then on the top, I wear a rash guard. I wear a long sleeve, which is usually kind of like bathing suit material, something you'll see people wearing, maybe paddle boarding or surfing so they don't get sunburned or rashes. And then some of the other things about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is there's the belt colors. If you're under 16 years old, there's a whole plethora of colors. Not going to list them out, but as an adult, you typically will start at a white belt, and then you graduate to a blue belt, and then purple, and then brown, and then black. And in between those, you can get stripes. There's 4 stripes. And sometimes you'll go to a promotion and they'll pull you up and they'll say, "Hey, Tatiana, you get 2 stripes. Yay!" When you get to 4, you know that the next one is going to be a new belt. I'm a blue belt. It took me about 3 years to get my blue belt. Typically it takes, anywhere between 2 and 3 years. It all varies on the individual and how often you're training and just a lot of things that go into it, what your background is. And there's also a coral belt, which is very rare and uncommon, but that's above a black belt. And that's basically predicated on like years of being a black belt and your dedication to it and whatnot. I honestly don't know. I think I looked it up at one time, but I don't know all the rules for it, so forgive me. Right now I'm just working on being a good blue belt, and so let's go into my first day. So my first day, I signed up for the trial class at a local gym where I live, and this is about 4 years ago. It took me about 3 weeks to finally get into the class. And once I went, my first day, they loaned me a gi and had to get some help putting my belt on and tying it. I had no clue what I was doing. I was a little nervous, and I was also the only girl in the class, which I'm used to being the only girl at work in construction, or a lot of times at the sheriff's, during briefing or out on calls, you're the only female. But when you're going to go fight and you're going to be real up close and personal with people, it's kind of like, jiu-jitsu is like giving each other hugs and lots of good, kind of wrestling around on the ground. Especially on your first day, you're not so sure about these people. It would have been nice to have like a girlfriend to go with and just kind of ease into it, but I don't do things the easy way, apparently. The way that jiu-jitsu classes work is A lot of gyms will have like a white belt, kind of a fundamentals entry level class. Other times they'll just have you kind of start off, they'll pull you to the side and teach you some of the terminology and like how to fall, how to move your body around, which they do things like shrimping, somersaults, forwards, backwards, side somersaults, all different kinds of activities. And so you start off with a warm-up and you kind of run around and you do some, get in lines and you do somersaults and you do bear crawls and you do technical stand-ups and, a lot of different activities. And then once you're warmed up, the professor will give you a lesson, which is called technical, and they'll show you a move and then you practice it with your partner. And then after we do technical, then we go into rolling. And rolling is the latter part of the class, whether it's an hour or an hour and a half long class. You will get usually about 30 minutes of rolling, and each roll is like anywhere from, let's say it's 3 to 6 minutes, depending upon what you're doing and what gym you're at. And so what happens usually for me, rules, I kind of have these little rules of like whoever you did technical with is who you traditionally do your first roll with. And when you roll, you get your partner and you slap hands and then you bump fists, and that means, hey, I'm ready, you're ready, we're both ready to go. And then you practice, whatever you want to, and you get them into, certain positions. And then if the person feels like they're stuck, they get, they're starting to get choked or something, they just tap. And you hit the mat 3 times, or you yell tap, 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 or sometimes it's stop or ow, 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 all depending upon what kind of mind state you're in and where you're at. And so my first day, I had learned a choke, and I didn't know anything else before that. And I got a partner, Carlito. And Carlito didn't really have much experience in jiu-jitsu either. And apparently I frightened him. He picked me up and then dropped me. And when he dropped me, I landed sideways right on my shoulder. And karaka! I broke my collarbone. And it was an interesting experience. I'd never broken a bone before. It wasn't anything major. It was just more of it happened. Didn't go to the hospital because I figured, what are they going to do for me? And, it was rough and it was painful. But my first day, I loved it. I loved Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. It was like chess for the mind. It was fantastic. It was hard, but it was good fighting. And so eventually, once my collarbone healed enough for me to go back, I went back, and a couple months into it, I was rolling with a guy, and somehow, my arms were both kind of tied up. I was either holding or something, and he didn't want to get tapped, and so he did a somersault type thing. And when you're all kind of pretzeled in with each other, I went to do the somersault, and the only thing I had available to stop was my face. And so I put my face on the mat like so, and my nose rolled backwards and it broke up here. I did go to the hospital for that one just to make sure that everything was still in alignment and I wasn't going to have any breathing problems, which I don't. Luckily, a lot of times if you break it sideways, you'll have more issues. Mine was just backwards, which was very painful. But that's kind of a rare, uncommon situation. Typically, any kind of injuries that you'll get will be more of like fingers. I've broken a couple fingers, or a lot of shoulder issues, just because in the beginning you get into those positions where that's the easiest thing to get. If you don't say tap early enough, or your partner moves too quickly and you're not very flexible and you're like, whoa, your shoulder kind of gets jockeyed around. And when we're older, right, some of us are older, and you're just not as flexible as you once were. So that's kind of fun. Some of the other things I wanted to share with jiu-jitsu is the community, right? When I first started out, it was similar to triathlon, right? You get on the mat and you're just rolling with people you don't know. A lot of times you don't even know what their names are. Usually when you get into that, let's roll moment, you'll be like, hi, I'm Tatiana, what's your name? And they'll tell you. And one of my favorite partners I had at my first gym, his name was Joe. And I remember at one point, you're I don't think we were in the middle of a roll, but sometimes you're talking, you're kind of stuck or you're doing something and you're kind of just, being silly or whatnot. And I remember at one time asking Joe, hey, Joe, what do you do for work? And he says, I'm a truck driver. And I said, what kind of truck driver? And he was like, like a big Super 10. And I was like, hey, do you ever go to construction sites? And he was like, yeah, sometimes I do, and it always kind of sits with me and it amazes me because it's just all different walks of life. You get people who are, very successful, very professional, real estate moguls. And heck, tonight at a jiu-jitsu event I was at my professor's house for Easter, they were talking about a guy who had trained with a guy who's training Mark Zuckerberg, right? And, you never really know who you're rolling with. Not that it matters, but it is kind of fun afterwards, when you start talking to people and it's like, hey, what do you do for work? What do you do? And you start to hear about stuff. And what I love is just interacting with just everyday people, I have kind of an eclectic group of friends. But even today I went to an event at my professor's house, like I was mentioning, and, some of the people that you're spending, the afternoon with, you might never, ever have come across them. You would have never met them. And, they're just wonderful people. The Brazilian Jiu Jitsu community is really, really just supportive. People, honestly, I think it's kind of one of those things where you get into that physical like altercation, even though we're training and we're just practicing, but it kind of gives you an appreciation for your partners and everything that you've gone through, and you kind of have a little bond, I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but it just, anywhere you go, if you go to a jiu-jitsu club and you kind of say, hey, I'm from out of town, do you mind if I train with you guys? And everyone's like, please, welcome. And immediately you just, you can kind of make some new friends, I'll call it, because you guys have something in common, right? If you were into, I don't know, let's say like car racing or something, hey, I like your car, right? Jiu-jitsu's kind of similar. Now that's kind of a funny comparison, but whew, little bug just landed on my face. Even at the club, we have ladies' night, right? And I think ladies' night is really important where, like I was talking about, it took me 3 weeks to get into a class just because I was afraid. I didn't know what it was going to be like, and the nerves and, whatnot. And, ladies aren't usually, hey, let's go fight. That sounds great. But when you get there and you get, people, it's their first day, and you kind of show them, hey, we're going to fall on the ground. We're going to pick, your foot up. We're going to, you're going to fall back, be prepared, learn how to fall. And by the end of the class, people have a lot more confidence, a lot more understanding of kind of their body, and maybe other people, putting hands on their body, whether they're being choked or, just pulled or pushed or something, which then translates to that confidence just in the everyday world, right? So, for example, you're leaving the grocery store and someone looks a little suspicious in the parking lot, and you are maybe not so confident walking down the street or something. And even though you're not a black belt and you're not proficient in it, you still have that hands-on experience of if someone was to put hands on you, you wouldn't be, oh my goodness, what's going on here, right? You would have a little bit more of awareness, like, hey, this is going to be like this, and I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to attempt to, sweep their feet out from under them and get them to the ground, where as a grappler, you're more comfortable getting into a controlled position. So I definitely recommend it, for women, obviously for men, for anyone, for kids. And one of the things too, as it relates to kids and just people in general, but kids as well, when you first start out, you really have to understand the humble nature. I mean, martial arts has always been very humble. You bow. You get waved onto the mat by professor, you come out, you shake their hand, thank you, nice to see you. But more so what it does is it really teaches you, the kind of scenario I always bring up is the windshield and the bug, right? And as a white belt, you're constantly the bug. And by that, I mean, if you're driving your car and the bug hits your windshield, the bug usually leaves some kind of a colored mark on your windshield and the bug's gone. And it's very defeating to come into something, be new at it, and constantly just be getting, submitted and armbarred and triangled and choked and everything. And you're thinking, I want to win. I want to get that. How do I get better? Why am I not getting better? And, it's hard for someone like me who's very competitive, and you want to get in there and you want to win immediately. And you have to remind yourself, okay, you're new, you're learning something new. And, even constantly throughout your whole, jiu-jitsu time frame, I don't want to call it a career, but like your time frame of learning, as soon as you've kind of sort of mastered something where it's like, preparing for a competition. I mean, I armbarred everybody in the gym. I was ready. I was excited. I was on a mission to armbar anybody and everybody I could. And then once you realize that arm bars, you can see them everywhere. You're like, there's an arm bar. People get kind of, a little tired. They know that that's your game. And they're kind of like, well, she's going to arm bar me, right? And that's when, for me, I go, okay, it's time to level up my game. It's time to go for a triangle, or it's time to go for a sweep or something different, right? I know I'm using a lot of terms that you guys are probably not familiar with, but these are jargon terms from jiu-jitsu. A sweep is if you're on the bottom and you make the other person who's on the top, if you kind of flip them and now they're on their back and they're on the bottom and you're on the top, that's a sweep. So it's kind of fun. What was the other thing I wanted to share with you guys? The bug and the windshield and being humble. Ladies' night. Let me check back through my notes here. I did a good recording prior to this one that I'm doing now, and guess what? There was no audio. Can you believe it? I tried everything. Sorry. I just killed a bug on the microphone. Hey, some days you're the windshield and some days you're the bug. Today, the bug was the microphone and the bug. Anyways, found my notes, and the other thing that I wanted to share was how much jiu-jitsu parallels everyday life. And what do I mean by that? So what I mean by jiu-jitsu parallels everyday life is one of the lessons that I had to learn when I was doing jiu-jitsu as a white belt. There's times when you start off and they say, everyone is a spazzy white belt. Not everyone, but most white belts are spazzy white belts. And what that means is you're spazzy. You don't know what to do. And when you get into a fighting situation, usually something happens. It's like you slap fists and then it's like, go, right? And you want to lean over and grab the person and, push them or pull them or whatever. And if you, as you do jiu-jitsu and you start watching, the higher belt will usually kind of sit there and get into some kind of a guard. A lot of times they'll be in butterfly guard or something, and they'll be waiting for the white belt or the blue belt or the lower belt to make their move. And once you make your move, right, you feel like I've got to do it quick, otherwise it's not going to be effective. And there's so many times when it needs to be a little bit slow and more methodical. And it's like, I got to get it done, because if I don't get in there first and I don't, push the person down, then, it's not going to be an effective fight. And it happens in life too, where a lot of people, you just feel, hey, I got to get into this. I got to do it quickly. I got to do it now. I got to handle it. And there's so many times when if you just wait, slow it down, think about it, logically go through, okay, what's the next step here? What's happening? Okay, what's the next step? And if you have that time, great, right? It's just like in life when you're doing something and you have more time and more ability to really think about it. But, there's times when things happen quickly and, you have to jump. But there's things like, just an equation where I'll be at jiu-jitsu and I'll think, gosh, this is just like what I'm dealing with at work. You're trying a move and it's not working, right? And you try it again and it's not working. And sometimes that's like communicating with someone in your daily life where you're like, I've been trying to tell these people, or I've been trying to communicate something and you're just not getting through, right? And it's like, well, maybe you're not doing what you think you're doing, right? I remember being in a competition one time and my coach was yelling at me from the sidelines and he was like, get on your side. And I kept thinking, and I wanted to yell back to him, I am on my side. And it was so funny. I watched the video after the competition and I noticed that my hips were still flat on the ground, but my shoulders were on the side. And so what I thought was on my side was only like really halfway on my side. And what my coach was seeing and what he knew and, his body movement, and he was like, get on your side. Well, it finally clicked after I watched the video, which competitions are really great to teach you things you don't know, holes in your game. Whether you win or lose, it's if you learn something. And that's really kind of the takeaway for me for competitions. One of the other things about jiu-jitsu as well is I talked about it being kind of like chess for your body and for your mind. And one of the really nice things is, as someone who has a pretty demanding job, very stressful at times, when I get to jiu-jitsu, you get on the mat, and I say, mat on, brain off. And what I mean by that is when you're rolling, you don't have the bandwidth in your brain to be thinking about, well, how did that conversation go today? Or, gosh, was that the most effective use of my time? Nope. What you're thinking about is, okay, I got to get my arm up. Okay, I got to get her arm up. I got to move this over here. I got to, roll, hip, okay, balance, put your feet down, sit up, grab the grip, break the grip. You don't have time to be thinking about your day. And so in a way it's like meditation, it's an hour or 90 minutes, depending upon where you're at, of just kind of meditating, taking a break, thinking about, just right in the moment, okay, what am I feeling? Okay, I'm feeling them leaning over. Okay, I'm going to push. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, maybe I go the other way. And when you get done, it's like you actually took a break from your everyday life and you got to just, work on physical, work on feeling, working on all that. And, I really enjoy that. I think a lot of other people really enjoy that aspect of it. I don't know that it's spoken about all the time, but it's definitely like meditation. And when you're not, focusing on the bug or the windshield, where you can get very frustrated. There's days where you just, you tap, 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 and you're finally like, come on, man, like, why am I not getting it, right? And you're learning. As long as you're learning, it's perfectly okay. They say tap early, tap often. And, it's just, as long as you're having fun, as an adult, to go roll around on the ground and, learn how to choke people and learn how to get out of chokes. I find it to be incredibly fun. It's empowering. It provides the confidence like I was talking about. And it's a great workout. I talked about some injuries, and those are kind of anomalies. So I wouldn't be worried about it. But if you have, an interest, you have some questions, feel free to reach out. And, you're more than welcome to come to my class up here, I go in Folsom, or you can look at your local jiu-jitsu clubs and you can try those out if you're not, in Sacramento. But yeah, if you have questions, let me know, leave them in the comments, or we'll talk about stuff later on. And just want to say thank you for watching my podcast. And next episode, number 5, is going to be on astrology. So I know some of you are like, oh gosh, roll your eyes. Please give it a listen. What I'm really hoping to do is to give you guys a little bit more of a snapshot of what astrology is. And it's not just looking at the newspaper or when your birthday is in your sun sign, which is your, hey baby, what's your sign, right? It's more than that. It affects everything, and it is science. So don't tune out. Tune back in for episode 5 next week. And I hope you guys had a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See you on the mats.